Hi, I'm Chris, and this is The Last Bet. This channel is dedicated to helping people who are struggling with a gambling addiction and to provide support and encouragement to be able to help them stop, to be able to identify all of the different types of gambling that are out there, to highlight all the various things that are happening in our country that are promoting gambling, all the different areas that are affecting us, people who are gamblers like myself, who has battled this gambling addiction for many years myself, and to hopefully build a library of content that's going to be available for years to come. It's the whole point of why I started this channel. And you heard me say this is called The Last Bet. I did change the name of this channel from All In, which I found out was sadly already taken, so I did switch it to The Last Bet. So you'll hear me saying that going forward. That is what the channel is going to be called, is The Last Bet, which I actually think is more appropriate for this YouTube channel, is The Last Bet, because that is the goal for everyone coming on here, whether you're here to support someone or try to get help for someone going through a gambling addiction, or you're here yourself trying to get help for yourself to be able to try to quit. The Last Bet, I think, is an appropriate name. And what I'm going to talk about tonight, I've talked about various topics early on in the first 2 weeks of this channel, really highlighting, which for me is the most passionate area, is what I see is the generation at hand, the generation to come, the crisis happening on our college campuses, the online gambling, just the engine that is moving right now is a lot of online sports, online casino gambling, where all that is happening. And, I highlight in different videos of, am I a compulsive gambler? Some ways to help you quit. But tonight, I'm going to talk about just, a little more from the heart in what I share. I have hit just over 14 months gambling free, as I've shared in my other videos. My last bet was November of 2024, so I have just over 14 months gambling free myself. I've been a part of meetings since 2007. I've had as much as almost 10 years gambling free at one point. But with the rise of technology and, the online piece, I've had a series of relapses, which have been brutal. I will get to a point of sharing. My goal would be to actually hit 100 subscribers on this channel. So anyone that's followed me, I'm up to 22 subscribers. So thank you to all of the early people that have followed and subscribed. Thank you for supporting me in the early going. I would ideally like to hit 100 subscribers, and once I get to that point, share my full testimonial, which I believe will probably be easily a 45-minute, maybe longer video going through my whole testimonial of, my entire timeline of, my whole way through of gambling and path to redemption and where I sit today. But I will get to that point. But that's kind of my goal, is getting 100 people subscribing to share it with a lot of people. And not to negate the people that are here and starting and supporting me now, but I'd like to get that out there as I kind of build momentum, but I'm kind of building a foundation of some of the early topics to be able to build on this channel. So today what I really want to get into and to focus on is kind of the faith aspect, and at least kind of sharing from my own experience and the part of how do you stop gambling? Is it possible to stop? How do you heal? How did you get there? And I'll share from my own experience, a little bit of that and how you do that. So as always on this channel, these are all just my own opinions. There is, no expert side of things. This is from my own experience. Everything that I do on this channel is to help people who are suffering from a gambling addiction and problem gambling to get better. Let's get right into it. And I'm on the road tonight. You do see a different background. I'm sitting not in my typical office. I'm not in Pennsylvania tonight. I'm in Ohio, sitting in a hotel room, which could be the norm as I move forward with my job. One of my plans as I move forward is to actually hit some of the college campuses, talk to some of the college bookies and some of the people that are actively gambling to actually highlight really the massive presence that gambling has in what is going on, and actually highlight the college bookies. They're really proud of the work that they're doing. I mean, many of them make, as I've shared in other videos, $50,000 to $100,000 doing that job. And they're very proud of it. So I intend, as I go forward with my own job, to be able to go on some of these campuses and instead of just sitting in a hotel room, to be able to interview them, but then do some of the filming in the hotel room. So you'll see this in some of the future videos. It's part of my life, part of my job. You'll see a lot of Marriotts and things like that in the background. But all right, so just getting into it. Also, pardon me if I do cough and things like that. I'm a little under the weather. Caught a little flu bug from my oldest son. So apologies in advance for any coughing that takes place. I'll try to hold it in. So the gambling addiction in of itself, looking back, at my timeline, at all the various points that I gambled. Early on for me, it was with poker. And, as I've shared at different points in one of my earlier videos, when did it go from being a hobby to an addiction? And, in one of those videos I shared, like going to the gym, something I'm doing this year. I'm in the gym every other day, focusing on my health. I think about going to the gym in the morning, and I think about it once in the afternoon. That's still a hobby. That's still something that I do. I'm not consumed all throughout my day thinking about, I gotta go to the gym. I gotta go to the gym. I gotta go to the gym. It's not filling my mind over and over and over. I like watching movies. I like things like Netflix. I like documentaries. I like random stuff. I like a lot of funny stuff. Like right now I started rewatching Reno 911. Hilarious stuff. I like really funny stuff. It's just what I do. Reno 911. I thought about it once in the morning, once in the afternoon. It's hobby kind of stuff. It's not consuming stuff. Gambling consumed me. It consumed me when it was poker. It consumed me when it was sports betting. It consumed me when it was any level of cards. Anything related to money and financial, it consumed me. It was on my mind constantly, whether it was chasing. It always bothered me whenever I was either up, down, no matter where I was along the pendulum. If I was up a lot, down a lot. It even bothered me if I was only like in the middle of the road. Like if I was up or down, like $200 one way or another. I'm like doing the 6-7 over here, but if I'm $200 one way or another, it like bothered me that it was like I was almost flat. And it's like, because I would gamble a ton, and to hardly have any movement felt like I'm getting nowhere. So once you're in the process of gambling and you're doing it over and over and it consumes you, I've been a part of a lot of gambling support, and you're kind of, there's a term that's out there a lot that's when you're in the midst of compulsive gambling, it's kind of basically you're on the hamster wheel, if that makes sense. You see, if you ever go into a pet store and your kids, if you're with a kid or you're by yourself, and you go in, you look through the aisles, you see the different animals, and you go to the aisle where the hamsters are, and they got their little wheel there. You ever see a hamster go on a wheel? Boom, 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 boom. He's just gonna gerbil hamster. They're just scurrying. They're going nowhere, right? If you've ever seen them, they're on that little wheel. It's spinning. And where's the gerbil or the hamster going? He's going nowhere. That is exactly what it is like for a compulsive gambler. Because once you are on that wheel of gambling, that's exactly what you're doing. You're going, and you're going absolutely nowhere. No matter what you think in your head, you might have a direction of, I want to do this, 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 but you're still right here because you aren't making any progress. You're not making any progress in your life. You're not making any progress in anything else because you're stuck right there. And so that was called the hamster wheel, which I think is appropriate. It makes sense. But taking that term, if you want to take that term out of it, you're just stuck. When you're in that moment, you can do nothing else. When you're in full-on addiction, it is no different than any other addiction that's out there. And what's hard is the world doesn't recognize it the same, because there is help for drug and alcohol addiction because they can see it on you, right? When you're intoxicated, you're highly intoxicated, you fall over, it's on your breath, you're slurred, it impairs your driving. With drug addiction, same thing. You're passed out, you're gone. They can run tests on you, it shows in your urine. They do these tests that can prevent you from jobs. You can, if you're behind the wheel on any of these things, you can kill someone. Let me tell you, how many times, if any of you are watching this, how many times have you gambled while you're behind the wheel? I have. Many times. Many times. You're impaired while you're gambling, whether you're actually in the physical act of gambling on your phone or if your mind's elsewhere. If your mind's thinking about the lie, if your mind's thinking about the money, your mind's thinking about problems, you're elsewhere. You're not focused at all on actually driving. You're not focused at all on working. You're not focused at all on your family. You're not focused at all on being present with friends on any task at hand when you're in the midst of gambling that has taken over every aspect of your life if you are a problem gambler. It is the same as an alcoholic. It is the same as a drug addict. It is the same as any other addiction level, but it's very, very, very hard for our world to understand that. And I get it, because it doesn't show up on your breath. You're not passed out from gambling. It doesn't show up in any toxicology. It doesn't show up anywhere. But it is actually in some ways worse. I have had people that I have worked with that have told me, as I've shared in other videos, that it is harder to stop gambling than it has been to break their long-term drug addiction or to break their long-term alcohol addiction. Because a lot of people actually paired it. A lot of people actually liked doing, like an upper downer kind of thing. They like doing cocaine. They like doing, alcohol, some kind of liquor or beer. Usually it's liquor. Usually they like to do some kind of, bourbon or some kind of liquor, get really drunk. They do some cocaine because you want to stay awake all night. And with gambling, you kind of paired. There are people that did the trifecta of drugs, alcohol, gambling. And it was normal. So there's ways to stay up all night that you would do that. I personally never did that. I would have times where I would, if I would drink, if I was out and I would have a dinner, with my job, and I would have a couple drinks, it would make it easier for me to make larger bets. Absolutely. I'd make the larger bets even without drinking, but it made it all the easier to not care about the larger bets. But there are a lot of people that paired multiple addictions together, that was a regular thing. But the gambling addiction is so difficult because it's so accepted. It is so accepted in this world that we live in. It's just out there. And for the common person, they're like, why don't you just stop? Why don't you just stop? And so that's really just what I'm going to get to tonight is, how do you get there? How do you break that when you are at the point where it is hard for people? It's hard for any person to understand that's not in that moment. If you're listening here and you're like, I've never been to a point where, if you're listening to this and you're like, I've only ever gambled for 1 or 2 hours in a night, it is hard to comprehend how could someone ever actually get to this kind of level. If you're listening, and I appreciate you listening to this point, if you are listening and you're trying to comprehend how could someone gamble that many hours in a day, because for me, there were times when I gambled every single hour of the day, and I did it all on my phone. I was an antisocial gambler. Even though I'm a sociable person, when I gambled, this is where I would gamble. I would be in a hotel room. I did not like to gamble with I didn't like to be around anybody. I liked to just be on my phone. I didn't even like it. I liked to bet on sports, but I didn't like the television to be on. I was very specific about how I did things. I did not like the television to be on. I would only watch my phone, and I would like to refresh it in certain ways. I was very specific about how I did things. So you kind of get in these crazy habits. It's no different than when people are doing slot machines. But when I would be on a roll, I would be anywhere from 20 to 24 hours a day gambling. So if you're watching this and you're like, how is that even possible? How could you do that? The only way that I could try to get anyone that's listening that is trying to put that in their minds of how could that be possible is just think, have you ever fallen into anything close to an addiction in your life? Because addiction can take any form, because our world is full of addictions. The easiest would be phone. Have you been on your phone at any point for 10 hours plus in a day? That would be the closest thing. Have you ever had a work addiction? Have you ever been addicted to your job that you've spent 15, 16 hours a day at your job you couldn't leave? Have you ever been addicted to food, television, just watching games, whatever? Of course, I already talked about alcohol, drugs, lust, pornography. There's addictions to almost anything in this world. It's anything that, like I said, goes beyond a hobby that pulls your time. Money. Money's typically the greatest addiction of many people, which feeds very well into compulsive gambling. But there's a lot of people that think about money to an addictive level most hours of the day that actually keeps them awake. They're not gambling over it, but you might think about money many hours a day. So that's the only way, if you're listening, you're like, how could you gamble 20 to 24 hours a day? Just try to think, is there anything at any point in your life where you almost got to that point, even if it wasn't gambling, to try to put that in your mind, to try to sympathize, to try to have that understanding of an addiction's an addiction. Everybody has some level of where they go overboard on something. But once you're in that point, when you're in the 20 to 24 hours a day, you don't know how to stop. So if you're at that point and you're listening, I'm like, if you're like in that, I can't stop. So when I was at that point, I had to get help. I had to go find a meeting. That was the only thing that I could think to do, was to have people try to talk some rational sense into me, was to go find help. There's meetings out there. You can look for some gamblers help. There's meetings all over the place for, multiple types of help for people to support you. But to talk to someone, if you're kind of at a massive point, like you need someone that you can rely on to talk to, but you need to go to a place of help. Look, it'd be really easy for me to tell you, like, you need to go to a crisis intervention place, but some people might be listening to this and you're like, I'm in a job where I'm not just going to check myself into a rehab. So I have to be realistic of, maybe you're in a role in a job that's really dependent on, and you've got a family, and it's like, okay, I'm not just going to check myself into a rehab overnight. I have to be sensitive to that. In some cases, if you're in a life or death kind of situation, rehab is absolutely an option. Like, there are some gambling rehabilitation kind of places you can go to. Like, there are actual places all across the country that you can look into as intense rehabilitation kind of places. So just to throw that out there, that does exist, where you can just go. There's a cost to it, but if it's that versus your life, there are places that you can go to that's intense rehab that says, I physically can't stop. There's places that exist out there, just so you know. But if it's beyond that, you have got to grind, and there has got to be a pause. Because for any person, myself included, any person that's on that wheel where you're going nuts, there are moments of clarity in there. There are moments of clarity for anyone. Like you're not, while you feel like you're going insane, you're still a rational person. You're still a real person in there. Almost every compulsive gambler has a family that loves them, has someone that loves them behind the person. You're caught in an addiction that you got to pause. So if you're in a moment where you're 20 plus hours, you're constantly going, find that moment of clarity and capitalize on it. When that moment of clarity comes where you're like, what am I doing? Use it. When you say, what am I doing? Jump on it. When you say, what am I doing? Take that moment, delete the app, do something about it, find some immediate help, because what it's all about in that moment is turning that moment into 24 hours, 24 to 48, 48 to 72, day at a time, all the way to getting a week to 2 weeks, 3 weeks. If you can get that moment of clarity and you string that out to 30 days, you can start waking up. Because really that drunken mode is, you're in full-on drunk mode for about 21 to 28 days, that you're in full-on drunk mode before you can have a clear thought. You can't make any big decisions at all until at least, like, you're not even thinking clear until you're getting closer to that 30-day point of gambling free. So it's just total crisis intervention, crisis mode, just to get out, get help, don't place any bets, get rid of your cash, like get rid of cards, like entrust it to someone else, get to a point where it's like only have enough to just fill up your car, like crazy crisis intervention mode. For me, I think the main thing I want to get to in this video is, and because I went back to it again, the Gambling Addiction Calendar app that I have. You can download it on, whether it's, an iPhone or an Android, the Gambling Addiction Calendar app. I put in there, I stopped gambling because, and my reasoning, I choose to live. I stopped gambling because, and you can put any reason you want in there, I choose to live. And I think for anyone that's coming to this channel at any point, whether it's decades from now, no matter where you are, whether it's seconds of time that you've stopped gambling, you're scrambling, you're laying at your bed at 3 o'clock in the morning watching this video, you've got a day in, you've got weeks, you've got months, maybe you've even got years, and you're thinking about relapsing. I choose to live is why I stopped gambling. That's what I put in that app. This is November of 2024. And I think for any person that wants to quit an addiction, at the end of the day, it is a life or death. Because if you take something from a hobby and you take it to the level of an addiction, that means that it is taking over your life, taking all of your attention. It's taking your mind, it's taking your heart, your soul, your energy, your time. It's taking all you got. You have no choice. It's life or death, and it was for me. I choose to live. And I also chose to come back to God. I chose to place my faith back in my higher power, which I had abandoned for a long time. And I think that is a big aspect. I think that there's a lot of people that go through life that deal with many things like addiction that have a lot of challenges. Everybody in the world deals with some level of addiction or challenges or worry or heartache. We're a broken world. Anyone that's listening, whether they have addiction or not, there's brokenness, there's challenges that exist. And I think recognizing we, especially now, 2026 in this world, we like to grab the steering wheel and we like to grab it tight and we like to put anyone in the back seat that doesn't have our mindset. And it's like, just sit back. I know what I need to do. Just sit back and roll with me. And I had that mindset, and recognizing that got me in a lot of trouble. And finally, recognizing my addiction was actually a very good thing. And taking it to God and saying, God, use it for good. Instead of blaming God for my addiction and pushing him away, I finally embraced it. For the first time in 17 to 18 years, I finally embraced it and said, thank you, God. I get it. And I think that's a key thing. I see a lot of people, I've seen it over 18 years, of people that have a lot of sadness and anger that they are dealing with in addiction because it feels unfair. I felt it was unfair. I felt it was unfair that I should have an addiction. My sister doesn't have an addiction. Why should I have an addiction? I didn't choose this life. And a lot of people say that, right? There's a lot of unfairness cards thrown out in this world. We see it all over the news. That's not fair. That's not fair. Well, that's not fair. Why did that happen? Why did that happen to that guy? That's not fair. I did the same thing. When I relapsed after almost 10 years gambling free, I threw the "that's not fair" card at God, and I blamed him for it. I said, that's not fair that you gave me an addiction. That's your fault. Instead of embracing the fact that an addiction is actually a blessing. If you can take that addiction and you understand how powerful it is, if you have that kind of personality, if you take that to God, you let God use that and turn it in a way in your life to use that as the most powerful moment in your life, and you use that as a way to help other people, it's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. And it took me 18 years to finally say, thank you, Jesus, for this addiction. It's a great thing. Instead of bitterness, instead of anger, instead of pointing a finger, realizing it's a great thing. And that is why in my heart of hearts, I don't believe at all that I will ever go down that path again. But I also believe that doing these videos and reaching out and talking to people and hopefully helping another life, that I will also not gamble again by doing that. I will do a counter. You'll see a counter behind my head one day where you're going to see my days ticking off to say, keep going, Chris, keep going. Because it's 14 plus months and counting now, and I'm going to keep it going. So, stay strong. Win the day. All right, thanks for listening.